Hello and welcome into the SorareData Football Strategy Show. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Joined once again by Sean Newsham, PSU fans too, on Sorare today to talk about a topic everyone likes to discuss. Why aren't our cards worth as much today, Sean? I told you I wanted to talk about this, and you were like, I don't want to talk about this. It's only going to be depressing. But too many people have talked about it in the last few days, and I think it was time that there was some perspective to put into it. Not to say that like everyone's wrong. Like there are some people that I've been disagreeing with on the wonderful platform known as Twitter that allows everybody to say whatever they want. But I do think it's funny. I'm having the exact same conversation for football as I am for basketball, except there are different reasons. But I think we had to talk about this because I think we have decent opinions on this that people will listen to. And what's nice about this platform, Sean, nobody can talk back to us.
True. I feel like, all right, so I haven't been following your basketball related conversations, but correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the basketball issue is people are like delusional and don't understand that a player becomes not as good of a player because of what his L10 is.
There is part of that. There's part of that. We saw, not to make this into a basketball show, but we basically saw like a number of player prices like skyrocket before last game week, and now they're all coming down. And every time it's like, oh, well, this is why Jokic went down. Everyone's like, well, what about Doncic? And what about Giannis? And what about, and there's like a lot of this like whataboutism, and like there are easy answers that people don't like because they think it's like a complex thing. And I think that's carries over to football, that like there actually are some very basic and fundamental reasons why prices are falling right now and why some people are having a hard time selling cards. And I wanted to discuss that here. One more thing on basketball, though. If anyone here, and thank you to everybody who has joined us live, if you are watching this or listening to this, the new SorareData mobile app is out, or it's really just an upgrade to what we had before. So there are basketball lineups and game trackers, and there's a ton of basketball stuff in there. So anybody who is also playing NBA, and we've gotten like a ton of feedback like, hey, when's NBA going to be in the app? It's in the app. So go upgrade. You'll love it. It's just kind of our first NBA version. So there's plenty more where that came from. So go get it. Back to football. Sean, you told me you're having a hard time selling cards.
I never tell you this stuff. I never tell you this stuff.
Not true.
There are, and when I mean, this is the topic of the conversation today, and I know you. There are about 5 reasons why I think that cards are dropping, and not dropping, but like there's about 5 reasons why things have changed recently, and I think we'll get into it. So, first, we'll start with the easiest one that I think there is to explain from an ETH perspective. So ETH price is up. ETH price is up about 20% from where it was like a week ago, right? Like a week ago, it was in like the low 1300s, maybe 2 weeks ago.
You're talking ETH to dollars.
Yeah, ETH to dollars.
Yeah.
It was around $1,300 per ETH about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I think it's probably 2 weeks ago at this point. Everything like sort of like just jumbles together, but so it's probably 2 weeks ago, and it's now right around $1,600. So that is the most straightforward. This is part of why ETH pricing has dropped. Would you agree with that? Okay, Laird agrees. So that's number one that I don't really think we need to go into, because I think that we have discussed this enough. And like I feel like people understand at this point, like if ETH price goes up, card prices go down in terms of ETH. If ETH price goes down, card prices go up in terms of ETH, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't think the recent strong opinions on card prices dropping is about ETH, actually. Like they're dropping significantly in fiat, and I think that's why people are upset.
Correct. And I don't think that is, I wanted to bring it up because it is part of this discussion, so it had to be brought up. But it's not, I agree, it's not like a massive part of the discussion. Number two, is, and it's an overall concern of mine in general, people have moved resources to basketball. I'm going to save the most important that probably will impact the most amount of people till the last one, because obviously we want people to keep listening. So
Of course, yeah.
for that, but it will definitely probably upset a lot of listeners, but I think it's pretty accurate. And it was pretty much been my opinion for a long time. So we will get to that one at the end. But
yeah, we're not here to make friends, Sean.
We're not. We're here to discuss what's happening. So anyways, resources are getting redistributed from football to basketball. And the reason is people didn't see that with baseball is because no one cared. Baseball, no one cared about baseball. As like not nice as I can be on that, like no one really cared about baseball. Like people, yes, maybe put some resources towards baseball. I'm not saying they didn't, but like as an overall whole, no one cared about baseball. Basketball, people are caring about basketball.
Seems it.
People are investing in basketball. We have new people that are coming in that weren't on the platform that were going into basketball. A lot of top shot people are going to basketball. So resources are being distributed there instead. So do you agree that that's sort of an impact of where things are? I know basketball prices are down as well, but like that is part of the equation of why things are happening, because effectively resources are at a point where they're getting torn between multiple facets. So it makes it seem like everything is down, because in reality, they are, because resources are getting distributed to basketball instead of just football. So you have two resources that need to be devoted to from a resource dependent situation, and it all can't be just accounted for, because there's not double the resources. There's only a set of resources, and now they're getting distributed to two things instead of one.
So I did that. Like I sold football cards to buy basketball cards.
Correct.
Like 100%. I actually fully intended to sell football cards to buy different football cards, and then NBA dropped and I changed that plan. And so I think there's definitely part of that. I think we're definitely seeing more new users for NBA than we did for MLB. So it's not completely just from like people pulling out of football and going into basketball, but there's definitely some of that. And it's funny because later this week, I'm basically going to talk about this exact same thing for basketball, but the reasons are very different. And I think people need to just start realizing that football and basketball are very different games, but they're run by the same company. And so I feel like because football was first, there's this idea that Sorare is a football company and this other stuff that they're doing is taking away from football. But we also like talk about how they raised all this money, and it almost feels like everyone thought they raised all this money because of just football. Like there's no way they raise all this money, 600 million or whatever it was, if they didn't like present that they were like, we're going after the NBA, Major League Baseball, and whatever else they're doing. Like the company's not worth what they got a valuation for if it was just football. And so we just need to like appreciate now that like Sorare is this fantasy sports company, sports NFT company, and how the users move within that company is obviously out of their control. But like seeing, like, I don't think Sorare thinks it's bad that somebody's not necessarily buying more football cards if they're choosing to buy basketball cards. Like the idea is to sell cards. And so like, if they're doing it, then that's okay. So I think I've seen like this little like group of people who are like, they need to figure out a way to stop these people from selling football cards to fund basketball. And it's like, they're literally not going to do that.
No.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no. So that is definitely the next part of the discussion that we just had. The next part of the discussion is, as you see here with the graph, auction volume is up. The auctions have been very good. The issue is currently the secondary market is very dry. And the reason for the secondary market being very dry is the auction rate is very high in basketball, especially. So everyone that is pulling their resources from football to basketball is all going into the auction house right now, because there are so many auctions happening of players that are coming out. Like if you look, like I was looking, like, I mean, I'll look right now. So like Jokic is effectively the main guy in basketball, right? And if you look at him right now, he has 5 rare auctions live this second. That's just the rares. If I look at the limiteds, he has 1, 2, 3, 4. He has like 30 limited auctions live right now. 30. So like anyone that wants to buy a Nikola Jokic isn't going to buy it off the secondary market. They're going to buy it off the primary market. So like when you see this sort of like redistribution of like where the funds are going, they're going into basketball, but all of the basketball funds currently are going into the primary market, not the secondary market, which is an issue because if people cannot sell cards on the secondary market, which currently there is an issue with that, and that people are struggling to do that, then your primary market is going to start going down. So I know people were discussing sort of the fact that they need to be a little bit more protective of the secondary market. And I do agree, like they need to be more protective of the secondary market. Like the secondary market needs to be active and live and healthy. Otherwise, the primary market is going to fall by the wayside because people cannot sell cards. Therefore, people don't care about winning cards. Therefore, the primary market suffers. So as much as I've seen people say on Twitter that people do not care about the secondary market, that is not true. They do care about the secondary market. If the secondary market is failing and not being productive, then the primary market will also suffer and have similar fates from that perspective as well. Laird disagrees, as you can see.
It's not that I disagree. Obviously, the number of auctions is making it difficult to sell cards in the secondary market, because why would you spend more on the secondary market when you can probably just get another auction later today? Like the limiteds, they're all day. My response to this is basically, we knew this was going to happen. Like we know how many cards there are that they're going to mint. I don't see this situation where we get to April and they've minted 1,000 of 5,000 and then they blast them all out. Like I understand this, like, let's slow down, but slowing down is allowing the secondary market to start selling cards. Whereas I think this early in Sorare NBA, and again, I didn't want to talk about basketball today, but basically this early, the point is to get as many people to play the game as possible. And the easiest way to get as many people to play the game as possible is to make as many cards available. It's as simple as that. So I don't think that they, like, I don't want to say I don't think they care about the secondary market.
They don't care right now about the
But it's not the priority. The priority is to get as many people to play as possible.
Correct.
And like, if you cut auctions, now there's only so many people that can play Jokic.
Correct.
And they want more people to play it.
Correct.
And so prices are going to go down.
Yeah, I mean, this. I know we obviously don't want to talk about basketball, but this conversation can't be had without basketball being brought up on things. So, it is a question. So, Bullstar just asked, do you think that the drop in NBA prices over the past 2 or 3 days is way more severe than it should be, though, Laird?
So, I think this was something I was going to bring up on our show this week on Wednesday, but I'll just say now. So, they opened up a new competition this past weekend. So like all the run up in prices of really good players, like everybody did the whole, like, what about Durant and what about whoever? Like they opened up Rare Champion, where it's like, oh, you can play the best players in the game and not have that hit your salary cap or your score cap, the L10 cap. And it can be limited. So like, obviously, if you want to play and rares obviously score more, but like the price difference between a rare Jokic and a limited Jokic is big enough where I think people were like, let me just go buy the limited Jokic. I'll play that in Rare Champion. Yeah. And they did the same thing with Durant, who had 3 games this past weekend, or 2 games. He was the highest projected player of the whole game week. And so prices went up because utility opportunities went up. Like, oh, I can use these cards now. Let me go buy them.
Correct.
And then the game week closed. And now there's no more, we're not adding more utility. The utility is already set. And now there's not a reason to like run up and buy these cards now. And if there's not a reason to run and buy these cards, the prices are going to go down. People are not going to pay as much because there's less utility, because you didn't get to play it this past weekend. Like it's literally that simple.
Well, and people also were making the discussion. Like I remember I saw on Twitter, and it was baffling to me. Like people were like, "Oh my God, Keegan Murray got cut in half." What did you expect? Keegan Murray was a elite play, like the best play of the week. And as soon as that week locked, he is a not good play, probably period. Like he's just not a good option. So you went from like basically turning him into, he was basically like for a week messy. Like he was messy for a week. And then you turned him into like a 45 average forward immediately after that in football. So it's like you drastically changed how this player is perceived. So like obviously people wanted him for that one game week because he was a cheat code for that one game week. And then as soon as that game week locked, he's not cheat code anymore. Therefore, his price is going to drop drastically.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely some of that as well. Like that's a different situation that leads to the same endpoint, that like this is why he dropped. Like I really do think that like there are a lot of situations where the player's situation is what caused the prices to move up or down. And like, you can't go in and like justify every single price move. What I also have seen is everyone saying prices are going down because Sorare introduced this 5% transaction fee on every NBA and MLB ETH transaction. So what I gather from that, and somebody made this point in, I think it was Ultimate Team, that basically like because of when they introduced their fee, prices went up because sellers are just going to charge 5% more. Like prices are just going to go up because we're going to like be like, oh, this is, if I want to sell this card for $20 and it's like, oh, well, there's a fee on top of that. It's like, well, I'm not going to pay that fee. I'll just make the buyer pay it. And so you just raise your price. Like it's very simple. But the move was basically like they're introducing this 5% fee, and everyone's like, well, then I'm out. I'm going to sell my cards at a loss, and I'm just going to leave because I think this 5% is going to kill the platform, which is like absurd, right? Like actually absurd, because you're now like, I'm going to take a loss on a card that I bought because I think a 5% transaction fee will literally ruin the market. Like a fee that, lots of other NFT projects use. And so I just think it's like an overreaction. And then if you get enough people who are overreacting, and I actually don't think it's that many people who are overreacting, but like, because you see it on the secondary market, like you can't have it both ways. Like prices are dropping, but like you're also not selling cards. And so like the auctions just keep going and the secondary market is kind of slow, but like the drop in price of what we've seen from most of these players has nothing to do with the 5% transaction fee.
Yeah, I don't think it does either. I will say I thought the 5% transaction fee was a bit high. I was thinking it was going to be more like the 2 to 3% range. So them coming in with 5 was a bit hot. But again, I also wouldn't care if they distributed some of it back to you made the comment. So the 5% fee, I would be more than fine with 5% fee if they're like, we're giving 2% back to rewards in terms of ETH, which I know obviously that's not happening in basketball or baseball, but football, we can talk about that. So like, I'm all for a 5% fee in football if they're like, we are going to distribute 3% or 2% of that fee back to prize pools. And your comment was, well, we'll then just charge 3% and put 2% back towards prize pool. Yeah, but it looks, and I made the response to that, but it looks better on their end if they take 5% and are like, we're giving back to the prize pool. And also then they can effectively then take 6% at some point and give back 2% to the prize pool still. So it makes them look better while giving back, while not really giving back effectively, because your point did make sense. But yeah, like the fee is fine. I have no issue with the fee. I've said for the entirety of me being on the platform, I was totally fine with the fee. Do I think 5% was a little strong? Yeah, probably like 5% is a bit high. But I think you did 2 or 3%, that would have been more than fine from that perspective.
I think, I forget who brought it up, but I thought the best point that I saw about the 5% fee was that it really should just be tiered. That like the higher the sale, the lower the percentage, like that's exactly how they do bids now, that like the higher the bids, you don't have to go full 10% up or whatever it is at the beginning. Like I think for like the premium cards, people will try to find ways to not pay that 5% fee.
Yeah, well, I do think that that's something they need to look into, because like, let's say you have a 20 ETH card now.
Right.
You sure don't want to pay a 5% fee on a 20 ETH sale. Like,
No, and like the seller doesn't want to pay it and the buyer doesn't want to pay it.
No one wants to pay it.
So
Yeah.
like, right.
It's a
So
situation like if it's like a 0.1 ETH card and you're like, all right, I got to pay like $3, like who cares? But if you're paying that much of a deal and you're having to pay like a full ETH on it because there's a 5% fee, like that's a lot to do. And I do know that a good comment someone made, and I didn't think about it until I saw it and was brought up. This makes trading more viable, because if you trade cards currently, there is no fee. So assuming, let's get hypothetical here, that they do this exact same thing for football, which I think is a realistic vision.
I mean, it's definitely happening.
Definitely happening.
Like, we don't know this, but like obviously it's going to happen.
They're using NBA and MLB to dictate what they're going to do for football. So they're using NBA and MLB as like the testing case for football. But so like, let's say it's exactly the same. They charge 5% for football. Trading, you don't lose that 5%. So like there's a situation where I want to sell a card, you want to sell a card, where we're both going to lose 5% if we sell the cards, but if we trade and we don't lose anything. So I think trading becomes more viable when this all comes out. So like that's interesting from that perspective to see how that is. And then I think that the biggest part of the biggest question for me, and this is the part that I've had trouble wrapping my head around recently, is, and again, like we'll talk about limiteds last, because I do have comments to make on that I think you agree with as well. But like Diogo Costa, nothing has changed with him effectively, except for you don't have World Cup at utility with him. Going
it's a pretty big.
Well, you still have the World Cup exposure from Diogo Costa, but from a rare perspective, his price has dropped significantly. I mean, I guess it has in limited too. I have another opinions for limited, which again we'll say. But like, he was selling for 4.7 10 days ago, and this week he's been selling for around 2.8 to 3. That's some 30-40% drop off in price on Diogo Costa, with effectively not much happening to him currently. So the question I have is, what is the reasoning behind the drop off on Costa, Laird? What do you think the reasoning is?
Before that, do we just ignore that his price is the same as it was in September?
Well, yeah, because he went up because he's been good. Like, he's been really good. He actually finally didn't let me down this week in U23 Rare Pro. First time like ever. He didn't concede in like the 89th minute or something.
He does appreciate a good Adon game. But anyway, so sorry, what was your question?
The question is more so like, it doesn't have to do with Diogo Costa. It could be other players as well. But like, I think, why did he drop off 20 to 40% from a price perspective from 10 days ago?
I think there was a premium built into his price because of World Cup U23.
Yeah, but you had the awful take that nothing changed and he still had utility in the World Cup.
I'm sorry, does he not have utility in the World Cup anymore?
He does, but that's
is he not going?
That's not the point, Laird.
Are goalkeepers not allowed to be played anymore?
That's not the point, Laird.
Is that
basically he went from being
that was not my take at all.
So you think that him not playing for 3 games in the World Cup has or you think him not being a cheat code to have available in the World Cup is the reason why he dropped off 30%? Because
I think the decision that they made that basically neutered his premium is a big reason, particularly in limiteds, of why his price went down.
That's fine. So maybe he's a bad example of someone who's dropped off a lot.
Sean,
in price.
Before we go, like, we have talked about this for months of like how we responded to people trying to get ready for the World Cup. And they were like, I'm going to who's on the, who are the squads? Who can I get now who's going to play in the World Cup? Oh my God. When Italy got eliminated, it was like, oh my gosh, now Donnarumma's not going. Costa is going to be the only one. Actually, probably at that point, he hadn't even started yet. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, Costa's the only U23 World Cup, and his price went up. And then we find out that like, you don't really need him, and his price went down. Like, is it not that simple?
It could be. I mean, so is that just people were being unrealistic and had poor expectations, and then their expectations got brought down to reality, and that's what caused it?
I don't think it's fair to say that they were unfair expectations. I don't think anyone really considered that they would run U23 competitions without 5 players.
Okay, well that's fair. But people thought World Cup, like people that had been buying for the World Cup, you and I have said were nuts for 6 months. Like it just made no sense. So like I'm talking about like unrealistic expectations that people had going into the World Cup, where like people had been prioritizing and actually like making decisions based on like people playing in the World Cup. And you and I are like, it's like 2 game weeks. Who cares?
So
and they got brought down to reality.
Yeah, I think the other point is, and Mike Baston said this just now in the chat, and I think Josh did too. Yeah. So the response to the amount of time that we got between when they announced that basically you only need 4 players for U23 and the start of the World Cup was not enough time. So then it starts creating this like, oh, I bought Costa for the World Cup. Now I don't need him, so I'm going to sell him. But then when you have like enough people who think the same way, they're just going to undercut each other, and then prices go down. Like that's how it works. And so I think it was the amount of time. Like, had they announced this in September, I'm not sure we even see the run up in price anyway. So he's probably, it's the same.
That's fair.
And I do think that there was a little bit of a overreaction to his viability. Like, the starting goalkeeper for Portugal is still a valuable card. It sucks that he has come with a U23 premium, since he's one of the best U23 goalkeepers outside of the World Cup. But I think that's what happens. Like, yeah, Glenn brought this up in chat about Justin Bilo.
He's not U23 anymore, though.
So he's not U23 anymore, but his price like ran up when he got that like one random start, and everyone's like, oh, he's going to be the starter for the World Cup. Like, and that wasn't even U23. Like, it was just, oh, there's a guy who's going to play at the World Cup. I'm going to go buy him. And like, that was months ago too, Sean.
Yeah. To be fair, Bijlow could still be the starter for the World Cup. Netherlands goal.
True. Yeah. Absolutely.
It should be Flecken probably, but
whoever.
It shouldn't be Pasveer, I would say, at this point.
Whoever it is, you shouldn't be going out and buying them now for the 6 possible games they play.
Correct. Giuseppe asked also in chat why I'm not playing NBA currently. I don't partake in the early run-up of pricing. I just wait. Like, Laird probably overpaid for a bunch of cards in the early NBA run-up. I wait. I just don't partake in that. I didn't partake in it on baseball, but I actually do plan to play basketball, whereas baseball, I don't really have tons of plans to play baseball. Yeah, I mean, realistically, like, the goaltender for the Netherlands team could be, who knows at this point.
Yeah, are you Dutch?
I wish I was Dutch. Unfortunately, I have, despite being the Ajax #1, which, again, I couldn't be any worse than what's been happening in net for Ajax recently. I'm just saying, Laird.
Roland is saying they auctioned, I assume you meant Diogo Costa's unique one day before the announcement.
They did.
The announcement was last week, wasn't it?
They released it like right before they announced. I think the announcement was like 2 weeks ago, Laird. I don't know. Everything runs together. You and I've talked about, like, everything sort of just runs together.
Hold on. I don't think that's right. Wasn't it basically when they announced when they gave out the new calendar? That was October 27th.
No, they had it before that.
No, I think it was the calendar. That's how we found out.
October 26th, Laird, was like 12 days ago.
Yeah, I guess it was.
So, like, yeah, like, it's, I mean, the point stands. Like, it was like right before that happened.
Yeah, 3 days before.
Yeah,
they did Costa's unique.
Yeah, so like it's in the same time frame.
Is this price absurd without the 5 games of World Cup utility?
Are we talking about the uniques? I don't know. Unique pricing has been really weird because the prize pools are not good. So it's just an issue, I guess. So like people have not been buying. Some uniques go for a lot. Like, did you see Harvey Elliott on the weekend?
I
Bambi
did, but
sent,
I think that was a special case.
well, yeah, Bambi sent Mark to or YNWA to the cleaner on that one because he knew he needed that card.
Sure.
Which that was understandable. Like if you look at other uniques, like I mean Jasper Carlson went for like 8 the other day. Like that's not very much for a top 5 U23 forward. But obviously as a transfer risk. But like if I look at the
and no World Cup, Sean, and he's aging
World
out.
Cup, yep, they're
Or
not
Costa's
World
aging
Cup.
out too, and probably has the transfer risk himself.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I don't know. Like uniques, unique market's really weird recently. Because I do monitor it to some extent, but like I bought a unique recently, Laird Leon Flack. Paid one ETH for it, and he stinks. But it just sort of gave me.
I think you got your money's worth there.
I did because I was able to run lineups when Philly has a game as a standalone, which is helpful.
So,
but yeah, it's I don't have. Also, the next topic of the conversation that I think we need to bring up is the lull that's coming.
Hold on, is this such a drastic price drop for 2 months of less utility? 794 on 930, and the last one sale was 730. Like, what did we? Where's this humongous drop for Diogo Costa
in the rares?
I mean, there have been like 4 sold. Like,
yeah, that's 8,000 to 5,000 is a big difference.
Well, this 7,300 looks like quite an outlier. No,
it does.
Where it's 6,000 and now 4,600, 5,000. Like, we're talking about 3 transactions, and now all of a sudden, like that's the market's going down because 3 Diogo Costas sold.
No, I'm just saying, like it's also from an ETH perspective. Like I look at things from an ETH perspective as well, and from an ETH perspective, like that dip is pretty dramatic.
Yeah, yeah. So we think, and you think that's like if it's not World Cup utility, then what's the reason to jump?
Correct, and that's why I'm saying it's confusing. I will also say, like I said, like the lull, like we are about to hit effectively, like how every league like dies off a little bit when they like go to breaks. Well, there's like a month and a half break for every league coming up.
Like fundamentally, that was like my entire point.
That's a lot of my point on most of the cards. I do have conversations that we'll have about limiteds, but that everybody's going on break effectively. Like everyone's going on break. And that is why we're seeing that.
Like game utility. It's really hard for me to be convinced that there's something more important in terms of card values than game utility.
Correct.
And so you can make the case that like jersey mints and one-ofs are collectibles because there are like 7 people who care on the platform and they can price up whatever. Correct. But it's all about game utility. And we're about to go into a minimum of 1 month where a vast majority of cards on this platform are useless.
Yeah.
Like I was listening to the latest End Product podcast,
being honest,
and Quinny made this point, and he was like, most of these players are not going to the World Cup. Like, so like, if you're somebody who has bought for the World Cup, then like, that's fine. You'll have some players in this, whatever we're going to get, these 10-day game weeks that somebody brought up how they shorten the game weeks. And so people are actually losing utility also. But like, utility is the reason, excuse me. And so if you like, what happens during the World Cup, Sean? The NBA. The NBA plays. And so if I can sell some of my soccer cards and go play NBA, I'm going to do that. And that's what we're seeing. And so I can't like be super confident that like prices are going to go up when the World Cup is over. But I do think it's going to happen. Leagues start to come back in January. Some are at the end of December. Like we've got Turkey and Scotland are back. But then like we've got Mexico, Argentina is possibly back in January. MLS at the end of February. K League and J League start up again. Then when the Bundesliga comes back, I think that was January. Like when these leagues come back, utility comes back, people are like, oh, I need cards again. Let me go get those cards. And like, that's the only way that I see this, that like card prices go down when people don't need them. And for most of the cards on the platform, we just don't need them for the next month.
Correct. And that's a very, it's not even a month, Laird. It's like 2 months, because most everyone does not restart until the beginning of January, effectively.
You're right.
There's some sporadic stuff, obviously, but like you're talking the next game week on this weekend is like the 14th of November. There isn't another game till like early January. So you're talking like over a month and a half, 2 months. So that's definitely part of the drastic decline on cards, because like you said, like people only care about instant gratification. Most people aren't preparing for 2 months from now. They want to play something where they can win today. The issue is that they generally will pay for the ability to win today. So that to me is definitely something that that has an impact. But if you look, like is this a group of players that are playing the World Cup, Laird?
No, this is just like top champion Europe players.
Okay, so like top champion Europe players have gone down a pretty significant amount since the start of the season at this point. But that can happen, and that's something that can play and have that effect, because we're seeing again a big gap between the next sets of games. Like we're effectively having like a second off season here. Like the off season in the summer is like what, 2 months, 2.5 months, and we're seeing a month and a half break in the middle of the season. So like it's something like we're seeing what happens to like the Russian cards typically every season. It's happening to like everyone right now.
I think that's a great way to look at it, is like a second off season. And so, and we talk about it all the time, like as seasons end and during off seasons, card prices go down. Like that's why I made this other list of like, let me see if I can find it. Like the top, like cards I think will be worth more in in January, February.
I'm curious if these guys have gone up or if they've remained stagnant. Yeah, so they're going up a little bit.
Sorry, let me
from where they were. Like it only matters like where they were at on the dip, and like they were on September 17th lower than where they are now on November 7th.
Right. So, and we're getting like every day we get closer to those cards being useful and having utility. Correct. And so that's why those cards go up. And so I think if you are someone who buys low and sells high, not financial advice, but like this is when you buy, when the utility is the lowest, because nobody wants these cards now. Exactly. Nobody wants to buy cards to not play.
Correct. Then I think we are now ready for the last part of this conversation that is important, Laird. The one that you probably are super excited about. Limited prices going down. Limited division was intended on Sorare to be a division that was accessible for a person freshly coming on the platform. I think the idea with this was that limiteds were going to be very cheap as a whole. They were going to be higher expected players like Mbappe were going to be a realistic price point for someone to buy. What we saw is that people just jumped into limiteds because they saw a cheaper price point. The problem is a lot of people, I feel like, were not prepared for the fact that it was eventually going to be a drop in price points to a price point that is fair and realistic. Another issue with limiteds is there is no threshold in limiteds. If you do not score incredibly well, you are pretty useless as a limited, because you need to be very good. And I'm not saying obviously like week to week like it can happen, but like a guy that is a 55 average player has a lot less value as a limited player than he does as a rare player. Also, a 68 average player as a limited also is less valuable than what he is as a rare player, because you need to be perfect every week realistically to get up near the top of the prize pools. And if you're not getting up near the top of the prize pools, you are getting rewards that are not very good. So I think what has happened in limited is the prices have gone down because that's where they were intended to be. They were never intended to be a relatively expensive option. They were planned to be the cheap game that people can come in and play and be accessible for $100. They could create a decent team and play. The issue is that at the beginning, people were like, "Oh my god, I can't afford a rare Mbappe for 10 ETH. I'm going to buy this Mbappe for 1.5 ETH as a limited." Well, that doesn't work because there are a lot more people that can have him because there's a lot more of them than there are of the rare Mbappes and other stuff. So I think people that have gone into limiteds, that went heavily into limiteds, and this is something you and I have talked about for a long time. I never really was a believer in the limited division being a good spot to play and be productive in. In my opinion, the limited division was like equivalent in DFS to like the $3 game. It was like the $3 GPP where you're out there throwing a cheap dart and hoping to win like $1,000. Whereas people wanted the limited game to be like a cheap dart where you're winning like $10,000 or $20,000 worth of prizes. Well, that's just not what it's going to be. So I think that the expectations people had on the limited division were just way too high. And we are getting to the point where there are so many of these cards in the limiteds that it just does not sustain what the rare, super rare, unique divisions can be. So what's your thoughts on that from a limited perspective?
I think the price moves are more drastic because there are just more people. And so when you have like more people, there's more people who are willing to undercut others. And that's just how prices drop. I think the other factor, because I think there's a very big difference between Sorare introducing the limited scarcity to lower prices, like to make the entry price lower, versus making it like exceptionally low. Like I don't think the limited scarcity was introduced so people could get $10 Mbappes. Like, and I think one of the issues that when it comes to limiteds is that everyone always looks at the top. And it's like, look how much Mbappe is, look how much Neymar is, look how much Messi is. But like those should be the most expensive cards on the platform, like regardless of scarcity. And so when they are, everyone's like, "Ah, man, that's a lot." And it's like, well, the point of this game is not that so everyone can have the same cards. Like not everybody should have Mbappe. And I think most of the negative feelings that people have from limited are those who bought going into the season. Like as simple as that they bought at the peak and didn't realize it was the peak, or at the time didn't care, or maybe just didn't know that the way that like Sorare works is that like leading up to seasons, those are the peak prices. And so when you pay that peak price, you're obviously going to be really pissed when the price is half or a quarter when we're going into the World Cup, because you're like, oh, I haven't had these cards that long, but the price is dropping so much. Most people completely ignore what they've won. Also, they just look at how much can I sell my cards for now? But even if you're not winning, like let's say you're not winning and your cards are in half, like I totally get that. I would be pissed too. But I think part of like there were just card prices went up because a lot of people came into play. And so when a lot of people come into play and start pushing prices up, like everyone's like, oh, these are just the price of cards now. And then we all have our cards. Nobody needs to buy more cards. So the demand goes down. And now the prices are going to go down. Like I feel like I keep going back to the same thing, but it's like I haven't seen like a better reason other than people are like, oh, people are mad about this, mad about that. And it's like, I don't think that plays any role or a bigger role than literally just utility of the cards.
Correct.
And as seasons go on, utility reduces. And therefore people are less willing to pay as much as they were when you had an entire season in front of you.
Correct. And then what people need to realize too is like limiteds, you're effectively giving away an entire rare career of a player in limiteds in one season. Because if you effectively think a player is going to last like 10 years, like obviously, yeah, they can last longer. But like, you think a player's career is going to last 10 years, there is a max of 1,000 rares that can be out there on the player. In one season, there's 1,000 limiteds that can be out there in one player. So it's a supply and demand situation, and it's also a prize pool situation. If the prize pools aren't going to be good enough and people can't win a lot of stuff, the prices go down. And if everyone can get an Mbappe for $12, well, you can't sell an Mbappe for $50 because he's $12. So it's a definite supply and demand thing. And I think that the limiteds currently in the current iteration, there is too many limiteds that are out there to support the amount of players that want to buy limiteds and play in the limited divisions. So because also people are looking at it, I think a lot of people have realized the limited division is not where you want to be. You want to be getting your thresholds. You want to get your $50 threshold a week instead of playing the limited division. That is a more appealing use of $1,000 than it is to buy $1,000 worth of limited cards, because all the limited cards you're winning like a $10 limited card, a $5 limited card. I know you win limited cards that are worth like $1 and you can't sell them. So people have realized that rare is the much better spot to spend your money on and to actually to invest in. So I just think that there's just a lot better spots to do that. Also, people with Mbappe realize in limiteds they're not winning all the time, because you have to be so perfect in limiteds to win. You have to have the very best lineup possible, whereas you can have a bit less of a lineup to win in other divisions. If I look at Rare Pro right now, I'm winning U23 Rare Pro. And if I were to be playing U23 Limited this week, let's see what U23 Limited top score is, Laird. So let's go to U23 Limited and see what the top scores are there.
So I'll go through this exercise with you, but I completely disagree on the difficulty of limiteds.
What, you think limiteds are easy?
I think people don't realize. So the issue I have with limiteds is that people want to play $50 lineups and win $1,000 cards.
It's just not going to happen.
So, but you can absolutely make $50 lineups and win $1 cards all the time.
Yes.
So I was saying, I don't want to sell $1 cards. And it's the where I am in my gallery, I don't need to sell a $1 card. Yes. But if other people those cards sell, I'm not
saying. Here's a funny thing for you, Laird. The winner of U23 Limited right now is not that good of a lineup, and he actually has a Gavardiol who only put up 50 points. So it's actually a good case that you could have won this week without being perfect. And it's still not a $50 lineup.
But that's what I was saying before. With limited, everyone's looking at the top. Oh my God, you need 500 to win. You know how many people win every week? One per competition. And everyone's oh, I can't compete because I can't score 500. Well, you needed 290 to get a tier 3. And everyone's I don't want to win a card that's $1. Well, let somebody, fine. And this idea that you cannot win with a lower budget on limited is just wrong.
No, it's wrong. You can't be at the top realistically.
Sure.
Yes.
But if you're not going to buy the absolute best players, then you shouldn't be expecting to win the best rewards. But everyone uses the best rewards as the barometer of how they're doing. And it just doesn't make sense. Even in any scarcity, we see it in rare that people are oh, I spent all this money and, I can't win in challenger rare. And it's well, all right, but you could have played limited, and with that budget, you can win $5 cards. And I don't want to win $5 cards. And it's well, that's your choice.
Yeah.
But the points needed for rewards is not nearly as high as everyone yells about in limited. It's because all they do is look at the top, and everyone's talking about, oh, they're 170 star rewards. And it's you're not going to give out 1,000 Mbappes every week. Or I understand why people are upset when it comes to limiteds, but I don't think they're actually considering all of the facts. That's why I get really fired up about limiteds, because it's not, people are just looking at the wrong things if they're looking for success.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You can win cards in limited without the issue is, so I think the biggest issue, which we've sort of discussed, is the view people have in limiteds was and is flawed. People wanted to win $15,000 cards in limited, correct?
I mean,
like people
always
wanted
yeah,
what?
whatever the Mbappe limited is
Yeah,
what
like no, I'm not even that. Like people wanted to no people. That's the problem. People wanted to win Mbappe rare price in limited. They wanted to win the best cards on the platform in limited, which is not how things are set up. So like people are out here expecting to win a $300 tier 1 rare card in limited. So like their views with limited was like based on what you could win in rares, and that's what people were paying at the beginning. People were paying prices that were very extravagant that aren't sustainable based on what they're going to win. So like you can spend $200 on a limited live and win a bunch of $3-5 cards, and that's fine. But people were like, I want to spend $200 and win $1,000, not I'm okay winning $20. You know what I mean? So people's viewpoint on the limited division was just way higher than it should have been to begin with.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I just think the expectations of limiteds are out of whack with.
Yes.
I don't want to say with reality.
No, they are. No, they are. They were out of limited expectations were not realistic a while ago. And I think they're becoming more realistic, but people are upset because that's not what the expectations they had set were.
And I think they're also upset because their card prices dropped. Their card values dropped.
And the reason their card values dropped is because expectations are becoming more realistic and their expectations were not realistic.
Yeah. I apologize because it sounds like very harsh, but like
no, it is. That's why I said
don't. Yeah, I just don't subscribe to the idea that like you need the absolute best players to compete for prizes in limited. You do if you're trying to win the entire thing, but like that's the case in literally any of their main competitions. Like you're not going to go into Rare All-Star and win the entire thing with like a $200 or $500 lineup. Like it's just, it's completely unrealistic.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't win tier 3s.
Yeah.
And so everyone like looks at these tier 3 rewards in limited and they're like, man, these things are worthless. And it's like, well, you can sell it for $2. And that lineup that you made that cost $100, you've already returned $2 on. And you can use that same lineup again. And you can win another $2 card. And you can win another $2 card. And maybe some weeks you win one that's 75 cents. And you can sell it for 75 cents. Like, I think the idea is people are like, oh, I can't believe this is only worth whatever. And they complain about it. And it's like, but you did this with an $80 lineup. Like somebody brought it up in chat that like, you can't build a $50 lineup in limited. And somebody was like, you can in underdog and you can win contests in underdog.
Yeah.
Like, and like underdog is actually like a great, well, it's actually more specialist, but like we see prices of specialist cards like go up before game weeks. Like, oh, this guy's under 40 and he's really good. And everyone's like, well, every card price is down. And it's like, well, I just tripled my money on this guy. It was a 39 and his team is, minus 2,000 this weekend. But like, I don't, it really bothers me that everyone just keeps focusing on the top instead of like where most people win.
That's actually fair. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of it because I don't care unless I'm winning or up near the top. Like I don't care.
Sure. But somebody with your gallery should think that way.
Correct. But like you are right. Like most people's expectations shouldn't. It's all of an expectation thing. Like most people's expectations are, I want to win every weekend. Like I want to win a division every weekend, and that is not a realistic outcome for 99.999% of people on the platform. Like your expectation should be like, I want to get a card or two, depending on like what you're doing with lineup. So like if you enter a lineup in just all-star limited, your goal should be like, I want to win a card, not like I want to finish on the podium. And everyone's expectations are, I want to finish on the podium. And that's just not realistic for everyone.
I don't even know if it's their expectation, but they're comparing themselves to that. That it's like, oh, my team scored 320 and I won a limited that was worth 85 cents. And the winner got 550. And like, I'll never compete with that. And it's like, okay. Like you don't have to win all the time. Like you don't have to consider that your lineup needs to finish first. Obviously, we set all of our lineups and we're like, man, I'm going to win first place this week. I haven't felt that way in about 6 months, but there are people who do this. And it's like, and then they finish 2,348th in All-Star Limited and they win a tier 3 that's worth $1, and they're bummed because somebody won an Mbappe at the top, or whoever. It's not Mbappe. I guess they're not even rewarding theirs.
So Roland just posted a great comment, and this is something I think people need to take into consideration. So Roland has a 4.5 ETH gallery, and he's won 1.5 ETH with just limiteds, and it's took him 60 rewards to get there. But every tier 3 and tier 2 that's $3, $8, $12, they add up. And if you win 60 $12 rewards, that adds up. And then he makes a good point. If you win one tier 1 or tier 0 every 3 months, you win a tier 0 or tier 1. Somehow everything came together for the week and it happened, and you win a tier 0 worth $250. Well, that really propels you forward. But all of those small rewards add up. Like, there are constant rewards that, like, I mean, I'll run tier 3 rares worth like $12. Well, if I win 1,000 tier 3 rares worth $12, that adds up, and that adds to evaluation. Jonathan asked, do you ever put more money in or just play with funds that are on now? I put money in, depending. Like, obviously, I have never withdrawn for what I intended to invest. I never have withdrawn what I intended to invest and like took money off the platform. I did take money off when I bought a gallery once, and I needed to recoup the investment of buying that gallery, and then obviously what I had left. But I know you and I have both never like withdrawn, and we both have put more money in at times. If there are situations where and I'm incentivized to put money in, I have no problem putting money in the platform. But I also don't take money out.
I haven't withdrawn. No. That's basically the way that I deposit. I don't withdraw. Like, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, well, that's answering his question. If you just play with your funds now, like, you've never withdrawn. So like, there are people that withdraw winnings. I've never withdrawn my winnings. They all get reinvested back into my team in some way or another, whether it's like I keep the reward or I sell the reward and buy someone else.
Yep. I think so. This Mbappe thing, somebody, I apologize who it was in chat. Somebody brought up that, like, the drop, I want to find it here. The drop in the Mbappe price, like, maybe we should be thinking more about why he was ever 4,500 for a limited.
Correct.
Like, I think that's another thing that a lot of people, $5,400. I think one of the things that a lot of people ignore when they look at card prices falling is why they rose before that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean, it's like, I think Sorare markets are generally pretty reactionary.
Yes.
And unstable. And so it's not easy to just be like, oh, this is why his card price went up. But I think there's way too much emphasis on why prices are currently down and very little research into like why prices went up in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think if there's more thought on that, then it might be, it makes everyone a little more aware of like, oh, as prices are going up, like when Mbappe, like this part of the chart, apologies to those who are listening, but basically from like Christmas last year to Valentine's Day, Mbappe's price went from like just under about 2,000 to 5,000.
Yeah. And it does make sense.
I don't know why it did that.
Yeah.
That's a weird time. I'd have to look into that, why that even happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
But as his price is going to 5,000, like, does everybody who's buying at 4,000, 4,200, 4,300, do they think he's going to 10,000?
Apparently.
And if so, like, what reason do you think he's going to 10,000?
Correct. Marco just brought up a point. He said earlier this morning he was checking out competitions breaks, and it seems that leagues with shorter breaks, their cards have been dropping less. So cards that are coming back quicker, like at the end of December, are dropping less than cards that are coming back in like mid-January type thing. So that's a good thing to note, and it follows along with what Laird's conversation was.
Yeah. Their utility is coming back faster, so we should buy those cards.
Yeah.
What I'm really excited about are all the post-World Cup prize pools that are really small, because they're like, 12 teams that are playing, and everyone gets pissed about that.
Yep, it's gonna happen.
I can't believe I didn't win a reward with only 3 cards in my lineup.
Yep.
I don't know. Have you been buying cards that are of leagues that come back early?
No, but I just have a lot of cards.
Yeah, you just have a lot of cards.
I just have a lot of cards.
I've been targeting
specific
cards of guys who play soon after the World Cup.
I have very clear game plans with what I need to do, which most of them, as you know, have been taken care of recently. Like I have very few immediate things that I need to take care of. But the nice thing is, like when I have that, I just can buy stuff. So like I bought a Gavardiol Super Rare, which I don't even know if you knew I bought that. I bought a Gavardiol Super Rare last week just because I've wanted him for a while. I think he's one of the best U23 options going forward defensively. And I don't think he really has the option to die. He really only takes a step upwards and will start when he takes a step upwards. So, like, because I don't have any immediate plans on things I need to buy or things I need to get, I was like, well, this seems like a good time to buy this type of card because it's a good time to buy this type of card. Unfortunately, I also bought Daily Blend Super Rare, which that's not going great for me thus far.
I will say I've been getting more, my like phone battery is low because of all of the price alerts that I've been getting from my watch lists on SorareData.
Makes sense.
There are, man, if you want some cheap Asia goalkeepers, whoo boy, are they available.
Yep, true.
So who is this? Lairdinho Sorare, if that's how you say it, says to add up to those tier 3 and tier 2 limiteds, you need to be able to sell them to other users. What happens if those other users understand tier 2s and tier 3 limiteds are mostly garbage and not worth buying? So I think that there are a number of competitions now that make those cards viable, like Underdog 45. Like you're not, if you look at those lineups, like
Yeah,
very rarely do those include guys who are actually good.
correct.
And so there's utility with those cards, but you're also like, I struggle to be like, you sold a card for $1 and then, or excuse me, you bought a card for $1 and now it's worth like 80 cents. Like I struggle to sympathize with that.
Yeah.
Those are the same thing to me, basically.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are a lot of new contests that are helpful for cards like that. U45 underdog overall, limited or specialist limited with U40 players. Like there are a lot of stuff that has benefited stuff like that. But it's still like, yeah, a lot of them are useless cards, but people have been buying them and people still want to have that type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah. I was going to go on a whole other thing about like the time frame of when people think they need to be rich, and that bothers me as well. Like if you're upset that the reward you just won is only worth $1, you don't have to sell it. You can just hold on to it, and then maybe it'll be $2 at some point.
That's typically what I do. If I win something that's not worth much, I just sit on it because I just don't care enough to sell it at that point. Then maybe it'll be worth more in the future.
Right?
Why not? Like that's how I view things.
So I actually was sold a bunch of really cheap limiteds a while ago to help me with baseball. And it was like baseball limiteds were really cheap. So I was like, oh, I'll just sell my cheap football limiteds and buy baseball. And I think you can do the same. Like for me, because I play multiple sports, like I do that with basketball too. Like I'll sell them. But if it's under $1, I'll just hold it.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah. Did we miss anything?
I don't think so. I think that we covered everything. Oh, I guess the one other thing I will say, and I do think that it's hurting to some extent, the top end of the prize pool isn't good right now because we do not have Haaland, we do not have Mbappe, we do not have Messi, we do not have Neymar in prize pools. And that does have an impact on things because what you can win is not what it was last year. What you can win right now is just not as good as what it was. They really could use PSG back in the platform, which we saw them release them and then pulled them back down for whatever reason. But yeah, so like PSG being back in prize pools would be helpful just because I don't think this has tons of an impact, but like PSG guys being in the prize pools gives you the upside that people want that like that is helpful. Like it is helpful and because it not only like it doesn't help the top, right? Like it pushes other things down. So then like a Vinicius Jr., who was like the top guy in the prize pool, is now like the 5th guy in the prize pool. And the Milan Skriniar, who was like a high tier 1, is now like a low tier 1 type thing. So it's like stuff like that. It has a trickle down effect all the way down.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Those like prize pools when they started bringing back all like the Jupiler and Eredivisie leagues, like when Gakpo was a tier 1, you're just like, whoa, these are absolutely loaded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the first couple weeks of it was like, oh, you went from like giant turd fest to, oh my God, this is big. Like, obviously, it's not as big of an impact now because you have a lot of other stuff that's in there, but like those are the marquee cards. So like the marquee cards that you want to win aren't in the prize pools right now for that reason. And I don't really know why they haven't released it. I'm kind of confused.
But like, that's something we know. We know that like when leagues are reintroduced, the prize pools get bigger because they have more supply now.
Correct.
And yet, now that we're further away from that, and everyone's like, wait, where'd all those go?
Yeah.
It's like, we know this.
Yeah.
We know this. All right. I got nothing more on that, except we probably could talk like for 10 more hours, but I feel like we end up just going in circles.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But if there's anything that we didn't discuss or a point that we didn't touch on, if you guys could please leave a comment below on the video. It's certainly something that we'd be willing to pick up next week. Hopefully next week, the topic will just be like, oh, we're all rich again. But we're probably not going to, So it could be just more of this. But so if you could please leave a comment below. Also, if you are watching this, if you could please hit the like button, that's always really appreciated. Rate and review if you're listening to the audio version. Also a reminder to all of our Spotify listeners that you can watch the video through Spotify. So it's all there in case there's something we pull up on the screen. You can just pull your phone up and it'll be right there. So thank you for that. I'll be back later this week for the NBA show, as well as Sorare Andrews later this week. And then Sean and I will be back next Monday. So thanks everyone and good luck.